I was in love with the most amazing girl in high school. Emily and I had been together for 3 years, and it felt like we had built the foundation for our future. We had plans, dreams, and a connection that made everything seem possible. Then, my dad married Stephanie, who brought her son Jake into our lives. At first, everything seemed okay, but I never imagined my own family would betray me over something so personal. Before I tell you how my family betrayed me, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had someone try to control your relationships. Growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania shaped who I am today. Life was pretty normal until I turned 13 when my mom lost her battle with cancer. After that, it was just my dad Thomas and me against the world. Despite the heartbreak, we managed to build a strong relationship. Dad stepped up in every way possible, learning to cook decent meals, attending all my school events, and creating our own traditions, like fishing trips every other Saturday, watching football games together, and making big Sunday breakfasts. I did my best to make him proud. I maintained a solid 3.8 gigapascals throughout high school, played on the varsity basketball team, and stayed out of trouble. We had our tough moments, especially around the anniversaries of Mom's passing, but we supported each other through everything. Dad always told me that Mom would be incredibly proud of the young man I was becoming. During junior year of high school, I met Emily in chemistry class. We were paired as lab partners, and the connection was immediate. Emily had these incredible bright green eyes that lit up whenever she talked about her passion for art. She was smart, creative, and had this calming presence that made everything feel right in the world. Within a few weeks of working together, I gathered the courage to ask her out, and to my surprise, she said yes. Our relationship grew naturally. Emily understood my loss in a way most people could not. She never tried to rush me when I needed space on difficult days, and she became a regular at our Sunday breakfasts with Dad. We talked about attending universities close enough to visit each other on weekends. I planned to study business, while she wanted to pursue graphic design. Dad adored Emily, and often joked that I had somehow managed to find someone way out of my league. Emily helped me heal parts of myself I did not know were still broken after losing Mom. For the first time since the funeral, I could talk about Mom without feeling that crushing weight on my chest. Life felt good again, like I could finally see a clear future ahead. Everything changed during my senior year, when Dad attended a 3-day marketing conference in Chicago. He came back different, somehow distracted, and checking his phone more often. 2 weeks later, he told me he had met someone named Stephanie, a marketing executive from New Jersey. Their relationship moved at lightning speed. Within 4 months, Dad announced they were getting married. Stephanie was tall, polished, and always put together. She spoke confidently about everything from business strategies to interior design. Along with Stephanie came her 17-year-old son Jake from her previous marriage. Jake was a year younger than me and would be transferring to my high school for his junior year. I was happy for Dad, truly. After 8 years alone, he deserved companionship. Though privately, I worried about how quickly everything was happening. Emily reminded me that grief can make people appreciate new chances at happiness. So I supported Dad, helped with wedding preparations, and prepared myself for our new blended family. After a small ceremony and brief honeymoon, we all moved into a larger house that Stephanie had selected in a neighborhood across town. It was further from my friends and Emily, but I kept a positive attitude. The first few months involved awkward family dinners, new routines, and attempts at bonding activities that Stephanie orchestrated with military precision. Jake seemed friendly enough initially. He asked about school sports and even Emily. He was shorter than me, with dark hair that always looked professionally styled. Unlike my casual jeans and t-shirts, Jake wore brand-name clothes and spent considerable time on his appearance. I tried connecting with him through basketball, but his competitive nature turned even casual driveway games into intense battles he had to win. As weeks passed, I began noticing Stephanie's controlling tendencies. She rearranged our furniture without discussion, implemented strict dinner times, and had opinions about everything from my college applications to my clothing choices. Dad, who had always been relaxed and democratic in his parenting, now deferred to Stephanie on most household decisions. The dynamic with Jake grew increasingly uncomfortable. He joined the basketball team and seemed frustrated when he remained on junior varsity while I started on varsity. He signed up for the same electives as me, suddenly developed an interest in business programs, and even began watching football despite previously calling it boring. Most concerning was his growing interest in my conversations about Emily. Stephanie clearly favored Jake in every situation. When we both applied for the same summer internship and I got it, she suggested I decline so Jake could reapply. When I won a regional essay contest, she immediately asked if Jake could see my entry to use as a template for his own writing. Dad, caught between his new wife and his son, increasingly sided with Stephanie, offering apologetic glances instead of support. The situation reached a new level when college acceptance letters started arriving. I had been accepted to Penn State with a partial scholarship based on my academic record and community service. It had been my top choice, offering a strong business program while being close enough to visit Emily, who had been accepted to Temple University for design. The same day my acceptance arrived, Jake received a rejection letter from Penn State. I tried to be sensitive, mentioning my news only to Dad privately. He seemed genuinely proud, suggesting we go out to celebrate that weekend. However, when Stephanie found out about both our letters, she canceled the celebration dinner, claiming it would be insensitive to Jake's feelings. That evening, I overheard Stephanie consoling Jake, telling him the university had made a huge mistake and that he was twice the student I was. Dad said nothing to contradict her. Later, when I tried discussing the situation with Dad, he seemed distant, suggesting I should be more understanding of how difficult the transition had been for Jake. That night, I called Emily and told her everything. She listened patiently as I expressed my frustration and hurt. For the first time, I voiced what I had been feeling for months. My home no longer felt like home, and the dad who had been my rock for years was slipping away. A few weeks after the college acceptance situation, Jake met Ashley at a school fundraiser. Ashley was one of Emily's close friends from art class, a creative, free-spirited girl with bright blue hair and an infectious laugh. Jake was immediately interested in her, though it was obvious to everyone that Ashley did not share his enthusiasm. At school, I noticed Jake following Ashley between classes, waiting by her locker, and trying to insert himself into her conversations. Emily told me that Ashley felt uncomfortable with his persistence, but did not want to be cruel in rejecting him. When Jake asked to join our lunch table, where Ashley often sat, Emily and I exchanged concerned glances, but welcomed him to avoid creating drama. One evening at home, Jake approached me in our shared basement game room. He asked me for advice about Ashley, saying he really liked her, but she seemed uninterested. In that moment, I saw the insecure teenager beneath the competitive facade. I felt genuinely bad for him and decided to be honest. I told Jake that from what I had seen, Ashley was not interested in dating anyone right now and that he might want to give her space. I suggested he focus on building a friendship first if they had common interests. It was the same advice I would give any friend, and I thought I was helping. What I did not realize was that Stephanie had been listening from the stairway. She burst into the room accusing me of deliberately sabotaging Jake's chances with Ashley because I was jealous of him. The accusation was so absurd that I laughed, which only inflamed the situation. Dad came downstairs during the commotion and, to my shock, asked why I could not be more supportive of my stepbrother. When Emily heard about the incident, she was outraged. She confirmed that Ashley had no interest in Jake, and his persistent pursuit was making her uncomfortable. Emily suggested we invite Ashley to explain this to Jake, directly hoping it would end the situation. I agreed it might help, but was concerned about causing more family tension. The next day at school, Jake approached Ashley again, this time with concert tickets, asking her on a date. She politely declined, explaining she was not interested in dating him. Instead of accepting her answer, Jake told her he knew I had been turning her against him out of jealousy. Ashley was confused and told Emily about the strange accusation. That evening, Stephanie cornered me before Dad got home from work. She told me she knew I was poisoning Ashley against Jake, because I could not stand to see him happy. When I tried explaining that Ashley's feelings had nothing to do with me, Stephanie cut me off, saying she had always known. I resented Jake for joining the family. The situation escalated dramatically when Stephanie began telling Jake that Ashley only rejected him because of my interference. Jake became increasingly hostile, barely speaking to me and glaring whenever we were in the same room. The tension in the house was unbearable. Stephanie suggested family therapy, which sounded promising until the first session when it became clear she had already spoken privately with the therapist. The entire hour focused on my apparent adjustment issues and resentment toward my new family members. Dad sat silently as Stephanie detailed how I had been undermining Jake at every turn. The therapist recommended I work on my jealousy issues, never once addressing the actual dynamic in our home. After that session, Dad became even more distant. He stopped inviting me fishing, made excuses to miss my basketball games, and barely maintained our Sunday breakfast tradition. When I tried talking to him alone, Stephanie would find reasons to interrupt, or Jake would conveniently need Dad's help with something urgent. I felt increasingly isolated in my own home. Emily and her family became my refuge. I spent as much time as possible at her house, where her parents welcomed me with genuine warmth. They noticed the change in me and expressed concern about what was happening at home, but I downplayed the situation, not wanting to badmouth my father. As spring, formal approach tensions reached a breaking point. Jake announced at dinner that he planned to ask Ashley to be his date. I remained silent, knowing from Emily that Ashley already had plans to attend with friends and had expressed discomfort with Jake's continued attention, despite multiple rejections. The day Jake planned to ask Ashley, he arranged an elaborate proposal in the school cafeteria, complete with flowers and a poster. Emily tried warning him privately that Ashley would say no, but he accused her of interfering as well. As predicted, Ashley turned him down publicly, trying to be kind but firm about her lack of interest. Jake returned home, devastated and furious. He stormed into my room, accusing me of orchestrating the entire humiliation. When I denied any involvement, he shouted that both Emily and I had made sure Ashley would reject him. Stephanie heard the commotion and rushed in immediately, taking Jake's side and calling for Dad. That evening, Stephanie called a family meeting in the living room. With Jake sniffling beside her and Dad looking uncomfortable on the couch, she launched into a speech about family loyalty and sacrifice. Then came the ultimatum that changed everything. If I truly wanted to be part of this family, I needed to break up with Emily. Her reasoning was that as long as I dated, Jake would never have a chance with Ashley because of the girls' friendship. She claimed my relationship was creating unnecessary social complications for Jake at school. If I broke up with Emily, Ashley might finally see Jake's true worth without the negative influence. I stared at Stephanie in disbelief, then looked to my father, waiting for him to shut down this absurd demand. Instead, Dad cleared his throat and said, "Grady, we need to all make sacrifices for this family to work. Jake has been having a really hard time adjusting." In that moment, something broke inside me. I stood up and firmly refused. My relationship with Emily was not a bargaining chip for Jake's ego or Stephanie's control games. I told them both that no functional family would ever ask someone to end a healthy relationship for such manipulative reasons. Dad's face hardened as Stephanie whispered in his ear. Then he delivered the ultimatum: either I follow Stephanie's rules under her roof, or I could move out. He probably thought I would back down that at 18, with college approaching, I would not risk my stability. He was wrong. I packed my essential belongings that night, while Dad stood in my doorway, his expression cycling between anger and uncertainty. As I zipped my final bag, he asked if I was really willing to throw away my family over a high school girlfriend. I responded that he had already made his choice, and it was not me. My final words to him were, "Mom would be heartbroken to see you like this." I saw the pain flash across his face before Stephanie appeared behind him, placing a possessive hand on his shoulder. I walked out that night with no real plan beyond refusing to sacrifice my integrity and my relationship with Emily. Emily's parents welcomed me into their home without hesitation when I explained what happened. They offered their guest room until I figured out my next steps, treating me with a kindness that made my father's betrayal even more painful by comparison. They never pressured me to reconcile with my family, but made it clear I had a safe place with them. I took on extra shifts at my part-time job at the local hardware store and picked up weekend work washing dishes at a restaurant. Between school work and planning for college, I barely had time to process the seismic shift in my life. Emily remained my constant support, never once suggesting that our relationship was not worth the sacrifice I had made. Dad texted a few times during those first weeks, always with Stephanie's conditions attached to any reconciliation. He suggested meetings where Stephanie and Jake would be present to work through our issues as a family. I declined each invitation, making it clear I would only speak with him alone. He never agreed to my terms. As high school graduation approached, Emily's parents insisted on hosting a small celebration for me. My basketball coach, a few close friends, and even my guidance counselor attended. Dad did not respond to the invitation. From across the lawn during the party, I spotted him sitting in his car down the street, watching for a few minutes before driving away. It was the first time I had seen him in over 2 months. College brought new challenges and freedoms. Emily and I attended different universities as planned, maintaining our relationship through weekend visits and daily calls. The distance was difficult, but strengthened our commitment to each other. I worked part-time throughout school, determined to be financially independent. My scholarship covered much of my tuition, but books, housing, and living expenses required constant work to manage. I made new friends and built a support system separate from my family connections. When people asked about my family, I developed a brief explanation that satisfied curiosity without revealing the full, painful truth. My roommate Justin became a close friend after we discovered our similar situations. Both of us were estranged from parents for different reasons. Occasionally, I heard updates about my family through mutual connections. Dad and Stephanie had purchased a vacation home in Florida. Jake had been rejected from several colleges before settling on a community college program. These snippets of information came with an emotional sting, but grew less painful with time. 2 years into college, during winter break of my junior year, I ran into Jake at the mall while Christmas shopping for Emily. I nearly turned around when I spotted him, but he approached me directly, looking very different from the boy I had known. The designer clothes were replaced with a simple hoodie, and his carefully styled hair was cut short in an almost military fashion. To my complete surprise, Jake apologized. Standing between kiosks selling phone cases and scented candles, he admitted that his behavior had been driven by jealousy and his mother's manipulation. He confessed that Ashley had never shown any interest in him, even after I had moved out, and Emily and I attended different colleges. Jake revealed that after I left, Stephanie's controlling nature had only intensified. She monitored his social media, chose his classes at community college, and even tried dictating his friendships. He told me Dad had fallen into a pattern of appeasing Stephanie at every turn while becoming increasingly withdrawn. The vacation home in Florida had been purchased primarily to escape their deteriorating home environment for parts of the year. I asked Jake why he was telling me all this. He explained that he had started therapy on his own and was working to understand the toxic family dynamics. He wanted to make amends for his role in what happened to me. Before we parted, he gave me his new phone number, saying he understood if I never wanted to use it. A few months later, on my 21st birthday, Dad reached out. His message was brief, asking if we could meet when I was home for spring break. I agreed to meet him at a diner, halfway between our homes, specifying that I would come alone and expected the same from him. Dad looked older than I remembered, with new gray streaking his temples and deeper lines around his eyes. After awkward greetings, he offered a half-hearted apology, saying he had been in a difficult position trying to blend two families. There was no real acknowledgement of how he had failed me, or recognition of the choice he had made. He suggested we let bygones be bygones for the sake of family harmony. When I asked if Stephanie knew he was meeting me, his uncomfortable shift in the booth told me everything. He was still sneaking around his wife to see his own son. I refused to pretend nothing had happened, telling him I needed genuine accountability before considering a relationship with him again. We parted with nothing resolved the distance between us greater than ever. Almost a year passed before I heard from him again. I had graduated college and started my first professional job in marketing. Emily and I had moved in together in a small apartment building, our life step by step. I came home from work one evening to find Dad sitting in his car outside our building. He followed me upstairs, despite my obvious surprise, immediately launching into a litany of complaints about his life. Jake had joined the military against Stephanie's wishes and barely communicated with them. Stephanie had become increasingly controlling, monitoring Dad's spending, emails, and whereabouts. Their marriage was crumbling, but Dad's pride prevented him from admitting he had made a mistake. Then came the words, "I never expected to hear from my father. You ruined my life, Grady." He claimed that my refusal to compromise had created a rift that destroyed the family. If I had just broken up with Emily, temporarily, as Stephanie asked, everything would have eventually settled into harmony. Instead, my stubbornness had cost him his relationship with his only son and set a precedent for Jake's rebellion. I stood in stunned silence before finding my voice. I told Dad that I had not ruined his life. He had made choices as an adult, choosing his new wife over his son, allowing her to make unreasonable demands, and failing to stand up for me when I needed him most. I had simply refused to be the sacrificial lamb for a toxic family dynamic. Dad's face flushed with anger, then crumpled into something like grief. He left without another word, slamming the door behind him. I sat on the couch for hours afterward, processing the encounter, until Emily came home and held me while I finally allowed myself to cry for the relationship that seemed permanently broken. After graduating college, I focused on building a life completely separate from my family history. My marketing career advanced steadily as I put all my energy into proving myself professionally. Emily completed her design degree and found work with a small creative agency. After 6 years together, through high school drama and college separation, I proposed during a weekend trip to the beach. We bought a small starter home in a neighborhood we could barely afford painting and renovating on weekends to make it ours. In Emily, I found the partnership and understanding I had lost when my mother died and my father chose Stephanie. In her parents, I found the parental guidance and support I had been missing. My boss, an older man named Richard, became something of a mentor and father figure, offering both professional advice and life wisdom over occasional beers after work. I learned to create boundaries that protected my hard-won peace. Therapy helped me understand that my father's failings were not my responsibility to fix. I stopped carrying the weight of our broken relationship alone, recognizing that reconciliation required effort from both sides. Emily remained my steadfast supporter, never pushing me toward forgiveness before I was ready. The news about Dad's divorce from Stephanie came from Jake, who had completed his first military deployment and reached out via email. He explained that the marriage had finally collapsed under the weight of Stephanie's controlling behavior and Dad's growing resentment. Jake had maintained minimal contact with both of them, but thought I should know that Dad was not doing well. According to Jake, Dad had developed heart problems after the separation and had been hospitalized briefly. He was now living alone in a small apartment, the house and vacation property lost in the divorce settlement. Jake suggested that despite everything Dad might appreciate hearing from me during his recovery, I struggled with this information for weeks. Emily neither encouraged nor discouraged contact, simply reminding me that whatever decision I made needed to serve my well-being first. Dad had hurt me profoundly, choosing Stephanie over me at every turn, and then blaming me for the consequences of his choices. Yet something in me could not completely sever the connection with the man who had raised me alone after Mom died, who had taught me to fish and cook and navigate grief. I finally visited Dad at the hospital during his second heart-related admission. He looked small in the hospital bed tubes, connecting him to various machines. The confident man who had delivered ultimatums and blamed me for his unhappiness was gone, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely shocked and moved by my presence. For the first time, Dad offered a real apology, without excuses or deflection. He acknowledged that he had failed as a father by not protecting me from Stephanie's unreasonable demands. He admitted that his fear of being alone after Mom's death had led him to ignore red flags in his relationship with Stephanie and sacrifice his relationship with me to maintain a failing marriage. I did not offer immediate forgiveness, but I did stay for an hour listening more than speaking. As I prepared to leave, Dad asked if he could call me occasionally. I agreed with clear boundaries about what I was prepared to discuss and what level of contact I could handle. It was the beginning of a very different kind of relationship, cautious, limited, but honest, in a way it had not been for years. Over the following months, we rebuilt a fragile connection through brief phone calls and occasional coffee meetings. Dad attended therapy on his own initiative, working to understand the patterns that had led to his poor choices. I maintained my boundaries, firmly ending conversations that veered into blame or self-pity. My wedding day arrived without Dad present. It was a decision that brought both sadness and relief. The day was a celebration surrounded by people who had consistently supported and valued us. Emily's father gave a toast that acknowledged his pride in both of us, bringing tears to my eyes as I recognized the true fatherly love I had found outside my biological family. When our first child was born, a year later, I found myself at a crossroads. After much discussion with Emily and my therapist, I invited Dad to meet his granddaughter. He arrived with visible nervousness, bringing a handmade wooden rocking horse similar to one he had built for me as a child. The visit was brief, but opened a door to a carefully managed relationship centered around his grandchild rather than our past. Through therapy, I came to understand that forgiveness did not mean forgetting or excusing what had happened. It meant releasing the power those events held over my present happiness. I could acknowledge the pain my father caused while choosing not to let it dictate my future. I could allow him a limited role in my life without expecting him to become the father I had needed years ago. The experience taught me crucial lessons about standing up for myself and my relationships. I learned that true love never asks you to sacrifice healthy connections to appease someone else's control or insecurity. I discovered that family is defined by consistent support and respect, not simply by blood or legal ties. Most importantly, I realized that losing what I thought was essential, my father's approval and presence, had actually led me to discover what truly mattered: self-respect and authentic relationships built on mutual care rather than obligation. Looking back, walking away from that toxic situation was the hardest and best decision I ever made. It cost me my relationship with my father for years, but it allowed me to become the husband, father, and man I wanted to be, breaking the cycle of control and emotional manipulation. When did you realize that standing up for yourself was worth whatever pain it might cause in the moment? Let me know in the comments. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to choose their own happiness. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into.